Hey everybody, I'm Sean Robinson,
I'm Carson Grubaugh. Welcome to Living the Line.
and today we're going to be talking to somebody who I am very eager to talk to. I've been following his work for a grand total of it's only been about a year since one of our subscribers was like, "Have you guys checked out this Erik Kriek guy?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know him." And all of a sudden, this flood of information. Erik, I have been following you very eagerly for about 12 months now, which is a very brief time, I know, but you have done some extraordinary work over the past couple decades. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're located, what you're drinking right now?
I just made myself a fresh cup of coffee because I'm of Finnish descent. My mother is from Finland, and they're reputedly the biggest coffee drinkers in the world. So I sort of inherited from my mother. I think I'm drinking coffee all day, so I love it. But my name is Erik Kriek. I'm from the Netherlands. Currently, I'm in Amsterdam, so we're about 7 hours apart. Where I'm at, it's now 3:30 p.m. And I think you're located at different locations. I think there's Minnesota and where you're located.
Well, I'm in Alabama, so we now share the same time zone at least. Me and Sean used to be on separate time zones too, so that
I
made
don't
We used to
know
do
exactly what the time is with you guys, but
Yeah, we got the morning sun coming in
okay, lovely,
the
lovely.
window over here. Uh,
And yeah, well, you've recently just. It's not strange that you just recently discovered my work, because I'm not very well known in the US. I think in Europe, it's the word is spreading. I'm from the Netherlands, and we're a very small language community. We share a language with the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium.
Right.
So, and that's it. You know, you could consider South African Dutch in a way, but it's different language, Afrikaans. We can understand each other, but it's a different grammar, different language altogether. So being a cartoonist, a graphic novelist in Dutch is hard because it's a very small market. So being a cartoonist in the Netherlands, we aim for our biggest neighbor here. Belgium is in between, but France is the most important country maybe in the world to get your comics published, because when you're published in France is very important, because usually when you get translated into French, you get translated into other languages, because a lot of foreign publishers look to what's happening in France. But the US is a different story altogether. It's hard. I had a couple of books out, but that never really worked out. Maybe you've seen my Gutsman comics.
Yeah,
That's
that was
yeah,
the one that our subscriber recommended to us, and I went out and
was
grabbed
supposed
that.
to be supposed to become a series by Top Shelf Comics. I talked to them in, I think it was 2004. And I wanted to continue that series, but that whole idea fell through because they fell on, I think, on financial bad times. So they canceled a lot of their foreign projects,
right.
Which is really, I must say, a very, very much of a letdown for me. So, but my last book was published by Fantagraphics in 2017. That was In the Pines, the Murder Bell. It's the one you made a YouTube video of, which is incredible to watch because you lavished me with so much praise. It was really. I was watching it with red cheeks. I was so flattered by your kind words about that book. So thanks for that.
It's fantastic stuff, and I think it leads very naturally into the Exile, which is the book.
Yeah, but you guys you probably don't know, but there's a musical volume that's supposed to go with the book. My Dutch publisher sort of gave that as an option to put a CD in it, but you can find the playlist on Spotify. If you look for In the Pines, and you see the logo with the crow. Because good friends of mine, the Bluegrass Boogeymen, are a local band here. We recorded the 6 songs of the book. Well, the five songs from the stories and the one from the title. So, and I sing myself on a couple of songs. So you can find that on Spotify.
Are you playing banjo on that as well?
No, guitar.
Okay, gotcha.
And I saw a drawing today that looked like you in the background playing saxophone. I feel like I just saw an image.
That was a little in joke because the soul singer I did the poster for wanted me to draw his entire band, but then I saw his saxophone player had a little physical similarity to myself. So
okay,
I thought I put that guy in the background. So it's a little in joke for the guy, for people who know me. But it is in fact his saxophone player.
Okay.
And he also has a goatee and he wears hats and he has glasses. So
I thought, man, I know Sean said he plays banjo, but he plays sax too. It's like multi-talented.
We were talking about murder ballads in the context of the book that you had come out from, I believe this came out in 2019 from Scratch.
Balling, it's called in Dutch.
How do you pronounce it again?
It's a bit weird, balling.
Bowling.
It means something entirely, that's something different.
Yeah, in English.
The balling.
Balling.
Which is actually a kind of archaic word for, you could also say bunneling.
Okay.
But I like the word balling because it can also mean the balling of a fist. So I like that sort of double meaning. But you'd say the balling. And this is the version in Arabic, which they published in, they mirrored the entire publication.
Wow.
The Spanish edition.
Nice.
And this is the French edition.
Very cool. Soon to be joined by an English edition coming out from Living the Line.
The luxury edition we did in the Netherlands, which is a nice, beveled in logo, and it's printed in it's bound in a sort of faux blood red leather. So I really like that. This was
there you go, Sean. Now the Living the Line edition has to live up to that.
Can't do the faux leather for various reasons, but
of course not.
But we're gonna get if people are interested, just to set the context. We're doing a pre-sale for the book right now, and that includes an edition that is a deluxe edition that has the extra content from that one and is signed by Erik as well.
The sketches. Some sketches in it, and a couple of photos, right? That's me and my son in Iceland. Yeah, that's a nice touch.
And so it's interesting to look at these two books in context with each other, because it felt like when Carson and I were sort of going back over murder ballads that I could see a lot of commonalities with the Exile in terms of obviously the art, like in murder ballads you're using a 2-color palette where you have the black line art and the second color is a sort of emotional key for the song. But then you've developed that in the Exile where your palette, it's still a limited color palette. It still resembles like a classical illustration technique, but you're using it to thematic effect. And without giving out exactly what that thematic effect is, I mean, can you kind of walk me through what your thinking was in the planning process in terms of?
I published this book with Lovecraft adaptations in 2012. It's not published in English.
Okay.
It was published in 9 languages, but English was not one of them. So you've probably not seen this, but it's called Het Onzienbare, From Beyond. And but I really took me years to do this because it has a different style.
Yeah.
And when I started doing In the Pines, I wanted to find a style that was a bit more economical, efficient to draw, because I didn't want to work so long on another story. I didn't succeed. I found a technique that took me even longer. So, but I studied printmaking when I was in art school, like way back in the 90s. So I have a tendency to draw in color separations. I do that naturally. So I was trying to develop a kind of a folksy art atmosphere for that series. And I stole the technique from, you have these old 50s illustrations, the 50s spot illustrations. where they use the colors to that effect. And also there's this, I don't know if you know him, I don't know him personally, but I know his work. I really love his work. I think he's Canadian of Korean descent, Michael Cho.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh, sure.
And he does that technique. He has it off to a T. I really admired his work. So I just decided let's try if I can do something with that technique, because I've always followed. Also, I don't think he's alive anymore. Darwin Cook, also Canadian, isn't he?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
He also profusely used that technique of just erasing the contour line and just using colors as. And the cool thing is that if you use the white of the paper, the white becomes a third color.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that. I love that plasticity of the drawing.
Right.
So, and as a good artist, it's better to steal ideas of other artists. So that's how you do.
Yeah.
And that's I sort of tried it out, and because I had panel borders in it at first, but then I started erasing panel borders, contours, and things sort of fell into place, and I loved the effect in the Pines, and I decided to take it a step further in the Exile by adding another color. So and in my latest book, which will be out next year, I'm still trying to finish that before the end of the year. The working title is called The Pit. I think I sent you a PDF of the first 14 pages or something, didn't I?
It's looking fantastic, yeah. And your color, you developed that color aspect even further.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea that it looks like it could be serigraphed, or something.
Right.
And a thing I didn't try in the Exile, but I tried in my new book, is just putting two contrasting colors on separate layers, so you get a third color by combining those two. So that's a real nice serigraph trick, but that works fine. That's lovely. And I believe artistically that if you limit yourself artistically, you just lay down the rules for yourself, and then everything has to fall into place. And I really like that idea of limiting yourself, because you have to be creative within the parameters you've set for yourself. That really works very well for me. So it's like this little challenge I do with myself, because it has its limits. You have to really think when you're drawing, for instance, where the word balloons are going to go, because you don't use outlines, so you can't outline the word balloon. So it either has to have a color in the background, or it has to be black in the background. Otherwise, you don't see the balloon. You just see the floating word somewhere.
Yeah.
So I try to, and it becomes very dynamic, because you can play with a cloud that slips behind the word balloon, or you can do a little detail or something. And I find that the page really starts to breathe, because it gives a very airy sort of way of reading.
Yeah, I think when you take. Sorry, go ahead, Sean.
There's an atmospheric roundness to it without the contour. It's interesting that you have a printmaking background, because that's the kind of conceptual place that it seems like you have to be in to reach for that. Carson, what were you going to say? Go ahead.
I was going to say dropping the contour line really lets the whole thing become integrated in a way that's more natural. Like there's often time, like right now, like the black of my shirt is bleeding into the black behind me. And so like I'm always kind of encouraging my students to drop line out to when you're aiming for something realistic. But even when you're cartooning like Erik is, or like you're talking about Michael Cho or Darwin Cook, they let it breathe into the rest of the thing. So yeah, to me it's more immersive experience because of how you're doing that.
It's fun because you sort of play with it. It's fun, and a lot of inking decisions I don't make, because when I pencil it, I pencil everything in line.
Yeah.
So it's only at the inking stage that I decide where the blacks are going to be. Like, this is like an original page. You see, so this is ink on paper, and this is scanned in. and then I do the color. I do digitally. The way I do it is I just put a color behind it, and then start erasing in the color. So you immediately see where the white pops out, and you just have to decide what's your main light source and take it from there. It's not very difficult. It's not rocket science. It's very difficult. It's not very difficult to do, but it's fun. But it's,
you are doing the color digitally.
Sorry?
I was wondering about that.
I do everything do everything on Photoshop or on my Cintiq.
Okay.
I have a very old computer and a very old Cintiq, but it still works fantastic.
Has that always been the case with this process, or were you ever doing like a second ink drawing and then scanning it and converting?
I've done that I've done that on occasion for illustration work, but that's very labor intensive and eats up a lot of my paper store. So
yeah,
this is a more practical way of doing it and achieve the same effect. So, because you can draw on a Cintiq. It's fantastic. I could do the entire thing on a Cintiq, but I just like to draw on paper. I don't like to sit on my computer all day. So I love ink. I love brushes. Also, the thing you never get on a computer is it's like using a drum computer. You never get the unexpectedness. You can't control a brush 100%. There's always 1% that gives you something entirely unanticipated. When it's a warm day, for instance, the ink dries out, so you get a more dry line. Which the computer, you can use incredible brushes nowadays, but they're other people's brushes they've made,
Yeah.
And you use something like the Bill Elder brush stroke, which I think is fantastic that they found a way to do it, but it's not the same as creating your own ink line.
Yeah.
Because a lot of colleagues I know have completely switched to working digitally. It's incredible what you can do nowadays. For instance, even on your iPad. It's incredible. But I use computers. I use iPads, but always as a tool for sketching. I always transfer it to paper in the end because I want that ink line. Yeah. I can't do it without that ink line. You need that.
I always feel like this reveals my age, but for me, it doesn't exist until it's a physical object, and having something that's sort of trapped inside of a computer is almost like a theoretical object. If you were to switch over to doing everything digital and you didn't have that initial ink drawing, it's almost like you're denying yourself the experience of having it be in the plane with you, having it occupy the same space with you.
There's a couple of issues. On the plus side, I need paper because when I draw a page, I need the whole page to compose it. If I work digitally and you zoom in on one panel, for instance, you're working all day, and then finally in print it's only this size. So
yeah,
I need the scale.
Yeah.
I like the feel. I like the smell. I like working with physical objects. On the downside, you have this enormous amount of storage needed for all the pages I do. Mm. But also I can sell my originals because there's collectors who collect paper. So my studio mate, who does everything digitally, he's more into children's books, but he does everything digitally, but he's jealous of my originals. So he recently did a children's book again, because he hasn't worked on paper in 25 years. Wow. So he was looking for the undo button all the time. His left hand was always looking for So for him, it was a difficult way to but I think his drawing really improved because he tried doing that again. Because I think he becomes very sloppy and very lazy drawing digitally. But that's my personal opinion. I mean, it's amazing digital stuff you see nowadays, and most of the time you can't even see the difference anymore. It's what some of my colleagues are doing digitally, it's incredible, especially coloring. I do all the coloring digitally. But as far as your point, Sean Michael, physical objects, my physical object is the book. So this page is just a step for me, because I only work for print. The end product is print, whether it's an illustration in a magazine or a book. It's always that's the end product. So for me, you know, that's not the issue. I mean, I like having piles of originals, but it's also something I have to find room for, you know, because, you know, I'll be 56 in a couple of weeks, so I generate a lot of paper. I've been at it for quite a time, so this mountain of paper I have to move each time I move studio. You know, it becomes annoying. So I try to get rid of it by selling a lot of it, but still only, you know, it's just the tip of the iceberg. I managed to sell. You know, I throw out a lot of shit. And sorry, can I say that?
Yeah.
So I hope everybody's listening then. So once you've picked up your copy of The Exile and you realize it's your new favorite book, you got to contact Erik and say, I need one of these pages. He's got them.
Most of the pages are sold. I have a gallery in Paris that sells they picked out the most beautiful pages. So they're already gone. They're already gone like that. So, but there's still a lot of original art from the book left. I've sold maybe like 10%. So, but the most beautiful splash pages are already gone because they were picked up like that. So
yeah. So your book came out is out, like you said, in French, and you have an Italian edition already.
It's out now in Germany.
Okay.
It's out in French. It's out in Spanish. It's out in Czech.
Okay.
It's out in Arabic, and it'll be out in Italian later this year. I'm not sure because they had some trouble getting out of the COVID. I think it's a very small publisher from Turin, so I think they had some financial trouble getting out of the pandemic.
Right. And do you get feedback from you know, foreign translated editions? Like, do you hear from readers or?
Yeah. Sometimes it's difficult because, you know, I can't read Czech, you know, so I can't evaluate the translation, for instance. But my German's pretty good. My French is pretty good. I'm not that well versed in French that I can evaluate whether the translation is good. The English translation I did myself, so that's something I'm really happy with, because that's something. It's always, you know, I try to find a certain vernacular, but I'm not a native speaker, so you have to, you know, find a way to sort of, you know, get around it. You don't want to sound too pedantic when you're translating into English, because it's not my language, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
But I also didn't want some kind of faux medieval speech or something, you know. So I tried to emulate my Dutch as well as I could to the English translation. But I think it turned out fine.
I was just wondering if, like, you know, when if you ever get to hear from readers or sort of anticipate how the different markets, you know, react to it. You know, Carson and I have talked to a lot of cartoonists about how odd it is sometimes to have this sort of invisible audience. And
it's always weird, because I make these books. Well, first of all, it takes years to finish a book, and then, you know, it's always very depressing. My wife is my test reader, but she reads it as in episodes, because I'm working, because I'm doing comics in between my illustration work. So but you know, in a month I'd finish 5-6 pages, you know, and she's like, is that all you've done in a month? You know, I'm like, oh my God. So that's always a bit of disheartening, but she keeps me. The cool thing about her is that she's not, you know, when somebody who's well into comics reads your work, they're always like, oh, you're referencing that and that, so and here you stole that from that. But my wife is she's like a reader, you know, she reads. But for this particular book, The Exile, my mother was the best test reader I ever had, because my mother is 88 years old, and she's from Finland. But I don't think she ever read a comic in her life. I mean, but we were having dinner one day, and she said, "How's your new book going?" You know, and I said, "It's finished. You can read it on my iPad." And she was like, "Okay." And you know how these things go. You know, politely scrolling through your book, but she was completely sucked in, like immediately. And I said, "Mom, we're having dinner. Can I finish the book after we've eaten? Because when it was finished, it's finished. But what about that one? Or what about that character?" You know, she was, and then I realized I've succeeded. This is a fantastic story because my mother was completely gone for 3 hours, which is amazing. So that was really like the best test case I had. Because, you know, well, I don't know how about your mothers, but my mother's always polite, you know. Yeah, your comics, yeah. Nice, you know, but she never got into it actually. So this was really, but it of course it was a topic close to her heart and close to her cultural heritage because she's from Finland. So she was very interested that I was doing this kind of tale in the first place, and she really liked the shamanic mythical elements I put in because she's really into that shit. So she was particularly biased for this book, and she was very excited that she was, of course, a bit let down that I didn't situate the story in Finland. But she was very vindicated that I put one of the main characters is from Finland. So right. I put that guy in especially for my relatives, because I have one nephew who lives in Iceland. So, but most of my relatives, I have a couple of relatives in the US. We are a diaspora. We are all over the world. But that character is especially for my Finnish relatives.
Yeah, two of the things I wanted to note that I think are fairly unusual in historic, really well-researched texts. One is that you have an acknowledgement of the sort of, hidden, I think, by a lot of people who don't realize it, cosmopolitan nature of life at that time, that people could actually get out and go to different places and come back. That even though people were, isolated on an island or whatever, there was still travel.
That is the greatest misconception about that time in history. You have to imagine that the ships, the Scandinavian expansion was incredibly influential because they had these incredible ships, which was like the technological equivalent of a jumbo jet now, because they were incredible. They could travel all over the world, and they probably did. And it's such a strange way when you consider now we have airplanes and trains and that everybody was isolated, but that's a total misconception. They've tried through modern archaeology to rebuild the Viking ships, and they've actually tried sailing from Norway to England or from Denmark to Ireland, and they found out that it only takes a couple of days actually because the ships are so good, you know.
Yeah,
it's a hard and grueling journey, of course, because they're open boats and you're like completely open to the elements and you're like dancing around on the waves because they're so light. But considering all those hardships, they could travel around very, very quickly actually. And Iceland was not isolated at all. It was a major production center for woolen cloth, because they had lots of sheep, and woolen cloth was the staple of all the sails. All the sails were made out of wool, so and that was mainly produced in Iceland. So that was the basis of their economy. So
it's amazing that people still have that misconception, even though it's been general historical knowledge. I mean, every time somebody they make another discovery and they're like, oh, well, here's another sign of like, here's literally Vikings in North America, or the range.
I think it has to do with because we are in the 21st century, and you tend to look at history as our generation being the most technologically advanced, but that's a misconception. I mean, we have computers and but in a way we are actually less technologically advanced, because I can't steer a ship. I can't build something. We're all dependent on, I can't grow my own food. I can't go out and kill a deer or something. So this knowledge, this craft, it's all gone. We're all weak and independent on our supermarket. So we starve if we don't go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a misconception. It's of course easily understandable, and we are technologically advanced in a lot of ways, but it's a silly idea. I mean, humanity hasn't changed for millions of years or thousands of years. It's just our technological advances have been different. And also, don't forget that slavery was the main economic staple for Scandinavian culture, so a lot of labor, the thing they did is they sold Christians into slavery. That's what they did. Right. So even in my story, there's a couple of Christian slaves. So because a lot of slaves came from Ireland, which was Christian. And they sort of ended up in Icelandic families because a lot of interbreeding went along, of course. So I've tried to hint at all those historical facts, but not without being too overly. I wanted to make an adventure story, not a historical work, But it's all there for if you get into the historical material. It's all there.
But and the second point that I wanted to make that's fairly unique about this type of story or well-researched story like this is that like murder ballads, in the Pines, you allow for the presence of multiple interpretations of events that could be seen as either psychological or spiritual in nature, which I think is actually a fairly unique thing. If you read a horror novel, the horror novel is generally going to give you the view that some event is a spiritual event. This is a literal demon. Here it is. If you read, a courtroom drama, psychological thriller, it's going to say, oh, there is no magic. Everything is happening inside of this person's head. Whereas, you've got it's a story that seems to be engaged on both levels simultaneoly, and that you're not necessarily.
I try to because if you read the medieval sagas from Iceland, these boundaries are not as clearly defined. I try to sort of emulate the pre-Christian pagan era. I set the story in because if you read certain Icelandic family sagas, it's very normal for a character to interact with his dad who died last year. So says, yeah, I met my dad the other day, and the other guy says, oh, what did he say? So they really believed in ghosts and spirits. So that is for an Icelandic story, that's very normal, and that's why I like because that you can do that uniquely in a visual medium. You can do that. It's and I also like to give it a bit extra layer. I don't want it to be overly realistic, and it becomes really tedious to read. But that's my personal taste. I always need a bit of. I mean, in the end, it's still a comic. So I always want comics to be true to their heritage. So it shouldn't be too artsy. It should have a firm leg into pulp culture. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So for me, that's me personal. I mean, I like that cheesiness of comics. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like that. It's just my personal taste.
It sounded like when you were talking about your mom reading it, and you said that it sounds like she's into the hoodoo voodoo aspect of it, and then you said all that shit. So I'm assuming that you're kind of like not buying into that.
I try. That's the only part of the story I completely made up, because I used some kind of, because about the pre-Christian religion, incredibly little is known. There was no known clerical class. So they think that the head of the family was also the priest. So, which is great if you do historical works, because you can just, think of, you can just think of anything. So I thought of I put a little voodoo in that. No, I wasn't brought up religious. I have nothing to do with any religion, or I don't believe in supernatural. But when I make stories, I like to put that in, because I believe the depth of human mind, the human mind has no limits. I think if you suggestion is such a strong thing, and you can tell the human mind anything, and it'll believe anything. And when you believe it, it's real. So, but you can't do a Viking tale without doing something supernatural in it, because this whole culture was so steeped in the supernatural, and for them it wasn't supernatural. It was completely normal. It was completely normal to meet your dead ancestor, in a meadow. And what they also believed is that everything was ordained from birth. So your fate in life was woven on a cloth by the three goddesses, the Norns, and you can't escape your fate. So that gives the whole culture a whole different mindset. It's such a difference from the Christian culture that became later. It's a very how do you call it? Very refreshing way of looking at life, actually. And that's why they because violence was, of course, it was around the door. It was an integral part of society back then. It was such a violent society. And also, natural death from natural causes. So it just gives them a sort of, I don't know, how do you call it? A sort of acceptance in life, which I find really refreshing.
Were there any lessons that you learned from researching that culture? The reason I ask is because me and my partner talk about this a lot. She's interested in hospice nursing and end of life care. And we often talk about the fact that our current contemporary culture really has no stories that help us deal with death in the way that, like, those societies really had a well-developed, like, narrative about death, it seems like. So I and other life lessons as well. I'm wondering, is there anything in the research that you go, oh yeah, I'm going to steal that outlook and apply it to my life?
Oh, I don't know if I mean, I like reading about history anyway. So of course I take a lot of that with me, but in a way, not in a way that I actually literally take something from it, but I'm always interested in cultures and the way they dealt with things. So yeah, but researching this book was not a chore. It was fantastic. I still read a lot of, and there's so much new material coming out, because historical research into Viking culture was really tainted since the 1930s, 1940s, because it was sort of hijacked by the Nazis, because it's still misused by a lot of European national, populist groups as being some sort of proto-European superior white-skinned, which is totally ridiculous, because they've done DNA research all through Scandinavia, and they've actually found that the population was so incredibly mixed,
right.
And which sort of culturally changes the whole idea of Scandinavia, and the world was such a different place than we like to see, because that whole idea of nations we live in now is such a modern idea. Back then they didn't have nations. They didn't have Norway or Denmark or Sweden. So it's for them. It's back in those days it was totally different. So that's what I take from it. It sort of puts things in perspective when you read about history. I really like that.
The approach that you're talking about with in terms of seeing these people as people who are just as capable or more capable than people now, and just as intelligent or more intelligent than people now, reminds me of there's a science fiction writer named Gene Wolfe who was also a Greek scholar, and he having done a lot of reading, written at the time of people who lived in ancient Greece, was basically like, do you think that every person who lived in this time was insane? Because they believed that they were communing with their ancestors. They saw the gods, on a routine basis. People had interactions with it. And his basic conclusion is like, well, either you think these people are crazy, or there's some aspect of this that had reality for them.
I don't believe that at all. I think at the end of the day, it's just people telling each other stories. That's what it is. And Scandinavian culture was an oral culture, so everybody who had a story sort of embellished on it, and of course it became more sensational. They didn't have Twitter or Facebook; it just had stories. So imagine these long winters, and the storyteller is one of the most honored guests in the mead hall. And he comes in and he has incredible stories, about dragons, and of course he heard it in a different version, but in his version it becomes a dragon. It becomes an even bigger dragon. You know what I mean? So it's sort of, and the cool thing about Icelandic literature, it was only written down in the 12th, 13th century, and then they become devout Christians. But there's this respect for their pagan heathen heritage. It's incredible. And what the coolest thing I always thought was that the Icelandic literature has assholes as a main character. It has anti-heroes. You read this saga, and suddenly you find out it's a killer. It's an asshole. He killed a lot of people and he's getting away with it. But they don't judge him morally. They're telling his story. I think that's, if you read these stories nowadays, they're 1,000 years old, but they're still readable. They're modern. So I think in the basis, those Icelandic stories are the basis for Western literature as we know it today. Because it's astounding if you read it now. Of course, it's 1,000 years old, but you can still read them, and because there's some very good translations in English. But if you can still read them and enjoy them, I sort of stole every details from all the sagas and put them in my story.
Have you? I'm wondering, because I just watched this movie, The Northman, as well. I'm wondering if you've seen that movie, because one of the things I told Sean when I read the book is like, man, like your story is what I had hoped I was getting out of that movie. But there are some similarities.
I thought it was a bit kitsch, actually. I liked it, but it was much more psychedelic than I had expected. And everybody was saying, "Oh, it's such a realistic depiction of Viking gods," but it's completely not true. It's completely made up. And I thought it was a cool way of retelling Hamlet, because it's just the story of Hamlet, really, isn't it? He's called Hamlet, and he lives in Denmark. So what really annoyed me, what made it kitsch, was that they were all speaking in a Nordic language like that, which is really annoying. If you decide we're doing a film in English, the audience is grown up to understand that it's not English, but it's Norwegian they're speaking. So that really put me off. It was so annoying. Everybody talking like this all the time. Really, as a European, that's so derogatory, and that's so Anglo-centristic. And there's a lot of movies who do that. It's like old war movies where all the Germans are talking like that, So it's really annoying. But that's a very, I don't know, that's a very American thing to do, I think, but that I enjoyed the movie. I mean, it was fun, but I was happy because I was afraid that because my book is older than the movie, so I was afraid that everybody would, oh, you're doing the Northman in the comic book, because, but I was happy that the movie is completely different than my book. So, but it was enjoyable. But it's not a realistic depiction of Viking life, what everybody said. No,
yeah, and that's what when I watched that and comparing it to your book, I thought, like, what you've done is richer and feels more accurate and stuff. And I was just like, man, I hope like whatever interest is coming from like Viking, because this movie was getting hype, like gets redirected towards the book a little bit, because it's like a much better version, much more accurate.
My book was heavily influenced by a movie. It's called When the Raven Flies. It's a movie from 1984, and it's an Icelandic version of Jojimbo. So that's what sort of got me into mixing Western with Vikings, you know. I think it's on YouTube and it's subtitled because it's in Icelandic. But if you get a chance, it's a Icelandic cult movie. It's great. I tried to get the director to, because my nephew lives in Reykjavik and he knows the director, so I tried to get him to write the foreword, but he has nearly lost his eyesight, so he couldn't read my comic. So,
that's unfortunate.
Yeah, he sadly declined. So, yeah, I think he did 3 Viking trilogy. It's like, yeah, it's from the 80s and it's pretty cheesy, but if you want a closer depiction of Icelandic Viking life, you should watch that movie and not Robert Eggers' movie, I think.
And you said that it's at least partially based on Yojimbo?
It's for a few dollars more, but which is based on Jojimbo, I think.
Right. Yeah. So
it's an Icelandic version of For a Few Dollars More. It's like a Western, but it's set in medieval Iceland. It's great fun. It has a fantastic, jazzy soundtrack. It's really a weird movie, but it's very good. I remember I saw that in the 80s, and I always stuck in my mind, what a good idea to do that with Vikings, So that's sort of where the idea for the Exile came from.
Those of you guys who are not familiar with it, Yojimbo is a film by Akira Kurosawa starring Toshiro Mifune, and it is essentially like Akira Kurosawa realizing, like, oh, hey, I can take a synthesized, stranger comes to town type thing and apply it to samurai, and then after that it got reflected back into the Western format in these Italian-made Western movies. And so it's this interesting mirror kind of experience where essentially somebody sees a connection with these types of narratives and jumps it across the world, and then the story keeps on jumping back and forth across the world. The chain of influence, instead of being a chain, it's it's more like a cross-Atlantic connection that just goes back and forth like a cat's cradle or something. And I think that there's a similar thing happening narratively with the Exile in terms of, you're taking not necessarily tropes of those genres, but maybe story derivatives. How would you say it? Like
standard beats in a story, or like a structure.
Right. And applying that to this, new setting. Which gives it a kind of, your description as a Viking Western is really evocative, but I also felt like almost like a, Shakespearean as well, like by sort of
Westerns are by origin a European genre, because they're the Westerns, Americans are Europe. I mean, they're not Native American. I mean, they play some role in it, but
yeah.
But so Shakespeare has an influence in everything Western culture, I think. But for me, the main thing is that the edge of Western civilization 1,000 years ago was Iceland, because they were right on the frontier, and there was no. They had laws, but they had no enforcement, same as the American West. So you had these isolated farm communities, like the American West, isolated families on isolated farmsteads, like the American West. So I sort of found that those similarities. You could easily take the story from the Exile and take it to the 1860s, 1850s in America. With some adaptation. That was my idea, to tell a universal story, but use a different setting.
Right.
It's cool to play with that. I like that.
Instead of coming in on the ship, he would have come in on a wagon train.
Exactly. You could imagine him coming home from the Civil War, being away for years and being, traumatized by seeing battle, and then he coming home and finding his dad died, and maybe he had this, without giving too much of the story away. You could easily transform it, no problem.
Right.
Yeah.
A little adaptation here and there.
Yeah, we should say at the beginning of the story, the titular exile, he arrives on a merchant ship, and he has with him 2 of his colleagues who he had fought with and is now, fast friends with. But it's a tribute to the type of planning that you did. That it's almost like backgrounded the fact that he was essentially a guard on the ship. He's on this ship that's carrying a bunch of.
I had this whole story mapped out, but I found in an early stage it would have been a book about 1,000 pages big, So I sort of skipped that whole, but I had that whole story of him, meeting his friends, and because he went abroad and sort of was a sword for hire. So that's basically what happened. But maybe that's material for another book,
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I'll do a prequel, but about my favorite character was the bald guy, because you know how things go with stories. You don't, the protagonist is just to keep the story going, but he's actually a very, I don't really like him. He's a whiner, but I like his friend. I like the. When I wrote the story, you start to like characters. I really like the bald guy, so that's why he gets the girl. So I gave him that. He's like us. He's more like meat and blood. Like the Halston, the main character is a whiner.
Yeah.
In his defense,
that's anybody who's watching this and is a creative writer will understand it. You design, you make a character, and then they sort of go off on their own. That's the weirdest experience. I love that. I make a character, then I break him. I always give him when you take something away from a character, you give him motivation, and then they're off. The story writes itself. The story is already there. You just have to draw it. That's the weirdest experience. I don't know if you agree at all.
How do you navigate that process? Do you do like a full script, or is it all just in your head and you go to the art?
I don't write scripts. I draw and write at the same time. Thumbnailing, then bigger. So the whole story is done in pencil, and that's real work. That's really work, plotting it out, and that's really the hard part. And then when that's all done and everything is redone, and I'm finally happy, everything gets inked, and that's the fun part, because I just can listen to podcasts and ink all day. So that's fantastic. It's better than sex. Sorry, baby. My wife is watching. Sometimes
they don't ever watch these things.
No. Too nerdy for her.
So you'll like lay out the whole book, or will you pencil the whole book before you get to ink? Like, how chunked up is your process?
Once I get the idiom going, I'm usually really confident that. But I need like 10 for 15 pages to get me going. Then I'm sort of, I have the pacing, I have the style, I have the mood down. And in this case, I had never visited Iceland, so I did a lot with photo research. But then me and my wife and my kid went to Iceland in 2017, and I have to throw these pages away, because the landscape was so much different than I had thought in my mind, and pictures just don't do it justice. And I was, so especially the sense of scale was wrong. So I redid all those pages, because I had actually been there and walked there and smelled it. And so that was it's like being on Mars. It's such a strange country. Everything is off. The sand is black, and the grass is bright yellow, and you have like 4 seasons in 1 hour. Like, it could be balmy sunshine, then next minute it's horizontal snow. You're in a blizzard. and this permeating rotten egg smell everywhere, you know, because it's volcanic. It's such a strange place, but it's beautiful. It's no wonder that every movie is being shot there, you know, from Alien to Alien Prometheus to Star Wars, you know, it's such a alien landscape.
Yeah.
Like the opening shots of Rogue One, Star Wars, that's completely done on the beach of Vic. I've been there. You know, the ship that lands, the opening shot.
Yeah.
That's just the black beach of Vic. It's so beautiful, but you know, it's an alien planet. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
You give a lot of those environmental cues in terms of, you know, the in-between panels. You know, you'll have like you said, you're using it as pacing as well. Like the characters will, you know, drop a beat or drop a realization, and then we'll have a pullback where you'll see the birds come across the, you know, terrain, and then we'll see the characters inside the terrain. And it strikes me that that's a really involved way to do it that would be totally impossible had you not visited, like in terms of getting those kinds of details.
Yeah, there's hardly any indigenous animals, but there's an incredible amount of birds in Iceland. So that really, and also you were talking about your earlier YouTube clip, you were talking about captions. Right. And I don't want to use captions. I have nothing against captions, but I don't like them stylistically. So I was trying to find a way to experience, you know, I don't want to use like in meanwhile or suddenly or during, you know, at the other end of the island. Yeah, so, you know, I wanted to do that visually. So I tried to use the birds as a way of mimicking the passing of time, and also that we're taking a bird's eye view and we're going to another side of the island, you know. And I think that works perfectly because I use the birds as a transition.
Yeah, so, it's gorgeous.
That's a stylistic way of me trying to tell that there's, because it's not very clear how much time passes, but I think it becomes clear out of context. I think this whole story takes place in a couple of weeks, right, you know, or maybe days. But you have to imagine that the distances traveled are very large.
Yeah,
it took them weeks to just, you know, cross the island, you know. So if you take that into account, also, you know, a trip to Iceland by boat, because you can only do it in summer. You can't travel by sea in winter. So the trader comes, he stays in Iceland the whole summer, and he goes back. So it takes place. This whole story takes place during one summer because, well, I'm not supposed to give too many details away. Right? And it starts snowing at the end, so we sort of tell the reader that, you know, summer in Iceland is very short. It's only a couple of months. You know.
Did you get a sense when you visited, like having done all of this research about the culture and then seeing the landscape, did you get a sense of how that alien, strange landscape impacted the culture?
Yes. The first thing that strikes you is that there shouldn't be any people on this island. It's so inhospitable. You know, but you know, we have modern heating, we have cars, we have, you know, all the modern luxuries. But if you have to imagine that 1,000 years ago, these people just lived in huts, you know. But at the same time, they had their hut building off to a T. So it really, you know, they knew how to build a good hut. So you had luxury huts, and you had, you know, not so luxury huts, you know. So, but still, life must have been really, really, really hard, because also they destroyed their own environment, because Iceland was founded basically by refugees from Norway. Mm-hmm. And the whole of the island was covered in forest, but they managed to destroy that in 2 generations, because they just cleared all the wood for agriculture, but topsoil, because the ground is frozen all through the years, so the topsoil is very thin, so trees didn't come back. So they brought cattle with them, which grazed all the young trees. So they basically destroyed their own ecology. That's what they did, and they were completely dependent on trade after that. If you imagine that I think in the 1700s, the population was reduced to a couple of hundred people because they were nearly starved out. So they became, part of the Norwegian kingdom again. Was begging them, please, to take them back. It's but if you walk around there, it's incredibly expensive. That's the first thing you notice, because your wallet is smoking. Terrible. But it's easy to understand, because they have to import everything. There's nothing.
Yeah.
And if you go to Iceland to want to have a drink, then it's impossible, because then you're immediately bankrupt. So it's so expensive. But if you ever get a chance, it's fantastic.
I think there's a lesson there for anybody who's hoping, other cartoonists who might be watching, or people who are hoping to set a story in a certain place, is that visiting there during the formative, portions of your work, I think, is really critical. My own experience.
Well, not in every case. I think I could easily, like for In the Pines, I didn't visit America for In the Pines.
Right.
So I mean, I'm an armchair traveler. I mean, I don't like traveling, actually, but most of the stuff you can just find through Google image search. But in this case, because Iceland is so exotic, I would seriously recommend to visit it. Yes, because it's such a weird place. So
I grew up in Florida, and one of the weird things about that, so Florida is actually a genuinely weird place as well. You essentially have animals that are older than dinosaurs walking around that will eat your dog, or they swim around in a lake. I mean, my job as a teenager was watching a lake in which there were, essentially like exotic killers swimming around in the same lake that I was watching. Anyway, anytime you see a depiction of Florida in a movie or something like that, it never looks right. It's always shot in California.
Right.
It sounds weird, but the sun will be on the wrong side of the coast. It doesn't look faded in the same kind of way. And
you only know that when you're actually from there,
Right, exactly. And you're actually in Florida, and everything is rotting, because it's moist and hot and, rotting and faded. And there's this certain kind of peculiarities to it. So maybe not every place, but
I agree with you. I could have easily set this story in the Netherlands, because Vikings were over here. But
right.
I always loved Iceland, so I always wanted to visit. So it sort of all fell together. But of course, you can. If I hadn't been to Iceland, it would have been a different. Because after having visited there, I really decided to let the landscape play almost like a character in the story. I really wanted to do it justice. And also, I had in the back of my mind, people from Iceland are maybe going to read this and they're going to laugh at me. Because also, they're really protective about their heritage and their culture. That's why I did the little disclaimer in the foreword. Because I don't want to offend anybody, because some of these people can direct their lineage way back to the Middle Ages, because it's a relatively young nation for European standards. It's only 1,000 years old, which is young in European history. So, and it's been so isolated. I mean, so I didn't want to offend anybody, like, oh, look at this Dutch guy claiming our heritage, So I really wanted to do respectfully to Iceland. That's also a part of the story, I wanted to do it respectfully. And but the main drive really for me was because Vikings are such a cliche, kitschy cultural trope, in popular culture, and I want. It's just been annoying me for years. The beer swindling barbarians, which is like ridiculous, and also the more right-wing fascist claiming of a genetically superior people, which is totally ridiculous.
Right.
So I wanted to do it justice. So that's what I've tried to do in this story. But the main thing is just tell a good story.
Well, I think that you've accomplished that in spades, and I'm very excited about people being able to read it.
I really hope it does well, because In the Pines never really. Well, I mean, I don't know if Fantagraphics ever gave it. I don't think they did a lot with it without. I mean, PR wise or airplay wise, I got a good few reviews, but they were like meh. The cool thing about it, it's in Hollywood now. It's being developed for television.
Oh, awesome.
But that could, you know, yeah, it was picked. I got a phone call. I didn't know the number, but it was Jake Scott, the son of Ridley Scott. And at first I thought it was my brother, you know, having the piss, you know. I sort of, yeah, right, Jake Scott, yeah, right. And he called me back. He says, no, I'm serious. I'm Jake Scott, Ridley Scott's son. You ever heard of Ridley Scott? And I was like, I had to sit down, you know. But, you know, he picked it up in London and he loved it. So it's sort of, then COVID happened and they sort of started writing scripts, and then I heard nothing for 2 years, and then I thought, yeah, well, that's the end of that then. But then I got an email that says, yeah, we're into developing the scripts. Are you still cool with us developing scripts? But the scripts are in Hollywood now, so I think the scripts are fantastic. I was jealous that I didn't write them, because the writing is so good, yeah. And
that's In the Pines.
Yeah, they changed the idea. They put everything in one little town. And they want to do every episode, they want to do a different ballad, and then, you know, one character can be the murderer in one ballad, and the next ballad he's the sheriff. I think that was the coolest idea. I mean, all the characters are walking around, but the stories are from different perspectives.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, that's what I should have done in the comic. You know, that's a great idea. But they're thinking about shooting the whole thing in Europe, in Romania or Hungary or something. But I haven't heard anything for months, so it's out there. Yeah, I've signed this shopping agreement that allows them to shop it around for a year, and then I think that expires in February or March, and then they'll either give it back to me or they'll sign it for another year. But I have no experience with television, so. But what I'm told by people who have, it says it could be months, or it could be 10 years, it could be 20 years, or it could be next week. So you never know. And what I hear is that there's such an incredible demand for content with all the streaming platforms, that the market is completely ridiculous, and they're looking at everything that's ever been drawn or written, and they look particularly to graphic novels, because basically it's
free storyboards.
Exactly, free storyboards, and it's a good sell, because people immediately get a feel of what it's going to look like.
Right. Yeah.
So, and well, that's what you see, because I think every comic book or comic graphic novel is being developed into film or television nowadays. So some good, some not so good.
Do you think that is their plan to actually license the songs that are still under copyright?
That's what I told the producers. I mean, I didn't write the song, so you have to. But that's what they told me. Yeah, maybe Apple TV is a good candidate, because they own lots of the music anyway. So they told me that Apple TV is looking for content like this, because they own a lot of the music.
That's smart.
So yeah, I thought, yeah, that's a smart idea. Well, but that's not my problem. That's not my problem. They have to figure that out themselves. I mean, I'm a humble cartoonist, so you know, just take my book and have fun with it. You know, it's a different medium.
Send me some money.
Yeah, I have no clue. It all depends on how your name is being written on the credits.
Yeah.
Apparently, I'm being told if you have a script writing credit, you make a lot more money than if you have just based upon.
Right.
If you have it based upon, I don't think you get that much money. But if you have an actual script credit.
Let me tell you how much my publisher brain has interfered with my creative brain now. Is when I read In the Pines the first time, I thought, oh, he adapted some copyrighted songs. What was he thinking?
Yeah, that was an issue we discussed, me and my publisher. but yeah. But actually, I gave a copy to. The book wasn't out, but I gave a copy to Steve Earle when he was playing here in Amsterdam, and he enjoyed it so much that he promised to sell it on his merchandise table when it would come out. So I haven't talked to him since, because that's a couple of years ago. But he loved it. So
that's fantastic. Yeah, the Gillian Welsh song. I was just thinking about how just from a practical matter, like if you had used all public domain things, you'd be able to present the lyrics however you wanted, or have like the royalty free performance CD if you wanted to, or anything like that. But
but that's why we decided in the earlier stages not to include the actual lyrics in the book. So, and then it's just I'm inspired by the story. So then for the Dutch law, it's okay, because we have something called quotation law. So by the Dutch judge law system, I'm clear, But like a song, Pretty Polly is just public domain because there's no rights, but the other songs are. But I just used the title, and I mentioned the songwriters in the book also. So I changed the stories. I didn't print the actual song text. I didn't use the actual lyrics in my balloons. So legally, I'm sound, I think.
We didn't touch on this in the video, but I think that it actually connects to the Exile in a very interesting and way, in that murder ballads themselves, if you look at the evolution of these songs, are transcontinental as well. Like some of the most famous ones, or some of my favorite ones, you'll have American versions of them, and then people have gone back and said, well, look, this was a British ballad, or this was a Welsh ballad.
I found
migrated.
Actually, I was when that book came out, I was invited to the Bradford Literary Fest in Bradford, England, and they teamed me up with a Oxford professor in murder ballads, which was actually fun because he was a specialist in Victorian murder ballads, and he sort of enlightened me a lot, because but basically it's like the Twitter of the 1800s, because they printed song lyrics on broadsheets that just distribute them, because there was no radio, there was no TV, so there were just minstrels singing those songs around. And like I told earlier, with the oral culture, it became more gruesome and more gruesome once it got retold. But it was actually a sort of a social medium, and especially Victorians, the professor told me, were obsessed with cruelty and with public hangings and murder. And you had these theaters, where there was this, I never knew, but especially in Paris as well, maybe the term Grand Guignol. Yeah, there was a theater where they reenacted actual murders with pig's blood, and throwing the audience with blood, and and offal and everything. It was terrible if you read it. But if you compare it nowadays, now we go to see Halloween movies or Freddy Krueger movies, which is basically the same, actually.
And if you take any one of those ballads, like for instance, like Matty Groves is a really famous, like American version of a ballad that, if you trace it back, I think the original one is called like Little Musgrave or something like that, or the tragic end of Little Musgrave. And you've got like a 300-year period in which this thing just carried from place to place to place to place, and you could literally, up until records became prevalent, you could go find people in Appalachia that would sing mostly the same melody or mutations of it. About Matty Groves.
I love that stuff. I'm playing clawhammer banjo, and in YouTube there's so much old stuff going around. I'm really, I love that stuff. So I'm really into old time music.
Yeah, and
I play traditional style. I don't do the bluegrass banjo. I do the folk banjo. So no, that's really my cup of tea, and that's what got me started into the Pines anyway, in the first place, because I'm a singer, and the songs I sing are used to be part of my repertoire, you know, especially not the Nick Cave one. My publisher wanted me to put a commercially more attractive song between the songs. Yeah, I'm not a Nick Cave fan, but I'm not against Nick Cave. But
he's written.
He thought if you put a more well-known name in your book will sell more. You know,
Yeah,
it'll reach a wider audience, not just the folk or the lovers.
yeah.
Which is a good point, actually.
Do you see any connection between In the Pines and the Exile?
Well, it was made by me. That's the most important point. But
Like, I'm
I don't know. I have been working for quite some time, but writing is something I have discovered only in the last maybe decade or so. That I actually enjoy writing, and it's like discovering stuff you had in you for years. But I think maybe stuff I'm really interested in is not discerning between evil and good. I just like to explore characters morally, from a morally ambiguous standpoint, and I think that's the connecting factor. Like I was saying earlier, the Icelandic sagas tell stories of anti-heroes, and I think that aspect is really interesting. Like in the Pines, I also try to not judge the murderer, but sometimes the victim is also guilty of murder. It's morally ambiguous. So there's only gray characters. There's no good or there's no black and white characters. I think
that's what I was kind of poking at there. I think is there's a similarity between the structure of the stories in those murder ballads and the Exile. I think it's like taking one of those murder ballads and then turning it into the opera or something like that. But there's something similar between them, that ballad kind of format.
Hey guys, on a technical point, but my battery is almost dead. So
okay.
I think
well, it's a good place.
We'll wrap it up then.
I'm in our communal lunchroom, so I can't connect here to a power socket. So
we've been going for quite a while. So
it's almost gone 5 here, so it's we're at it for quite a while. So you have but if you don't mind,
no, let's wrap it up. Yeah,
we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Yeah,
I have to go home and cook dinner for my family anyway. So
okay,
excellent. Well, I just like to thank you, Erik, for talking with us today, and I hope that everybody is listening to this right now will go and watch.
Hope you edit it a little bit, because it's rambling on and on. I mean, I could go on for hours, literally. I mean.
Our audience likes that. They like the rambling,
okay.
The long form.
I'm watching the Kickstarter every day, so it's really that's really exciting, to see how much further because that's really going well, isn't it?
Yeah. It sure is. Yeah. And I hope that everybody's watching this will go and watch our video for the Kickstarter, and will pledge and pre-sell this book. This is how we are paying for. Yeah, the initial printing is trying to raise the funds for the initial printing, and we've got about, as of our recording of this right now, we've got about 16 days to do it. And you can also pre-order this book through your local comic store and also your local bookstore. And it is just a fantastic book, and I really appreciate you taking the time, Erik, to talk with us about it.
It was my pleasure entirely. And I can only repeat what you just said. So I hope you like it. That's the main thing. I like it, and I'm arrogant enough to. If I like it, everybody else likes it.
Yes, it's a great book, and if you haven't supported it already, please go support the Kickstarter.
Pretend this says The Exile right here.
Yeah. I can show the French version, which has the similar title.
Yes, there we go.
But it is the same word, which is typographically different to design, because it has all the diagonals in it. Which makes my studio partner here, Rob, is a graphic designer. He does the production to all my books, and he really makes me look good. So
it looks great.
I sort of sketched out the logo. He did the final touch. and he really outdid himself, I think.
It looks great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it looks so much different than the Dutch word,
Right.
and the German was even longer. It was called der Verbannte in German.
Oh.
It's a longer word, yeah. But that's a difficult thing, especially when you do a logo by hand. You have to, and if you don't, I have it contractually now, because sometimes they just do something,
Right.
and it makes the books look ugly. So I want to, when I do a logo by hand, I want to do it in every language,
Right.
because otherwise it looks like shit. So
Yeah.
Yeah. We were fortunate that the Strange Death of Alex Raymond has been picked up in 3 different languages so far, and we got to see the Italian edition. They just went to press on that, and they just did an unbelievable job mimicking the hand lettering in English.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think that people are realizing how important the design is. Obviously, it's not always put through, but when you see it,
don't get me started on that, because publishers are so lazy, they just don't. and that's I always tell my studio mates here that you have such an unthankful job, because you only notice it when it's shit. When
Right.
when it's done perfectly, you just that's good.
Right. That's how it is.
And because when graphic design is perfect, you don't notice it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the same with with camera in movies or music in movies. You don't notice it because it's perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
When it's bad, you start, oh, that's annoying music, or that's an annoying shot. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
And then, of course, the more you sensitize yourself to that, the more difficult it can be to pick up something that has something like that that's flawed about it. But which is all to say, this is not a flawed edition. I got a little obsessive about making sure.
I think I'm going black in a.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thanks, Eric. Have a good one.
Hey, it was very nice talking to you. Maybe we can do this again sometime. And
That would be fantastic.
Absolutely.
We would love to do it, Eric.
I'd love to.
We will come back and do it
Keep up the
again.
good work, and maybe I'll see you someday over in the States, or maybe in Europe. Have you ever been to Angoulême, for instance?
I have not, but it's on my list, and
that's the best festival in the world, because they really appreciate comics there. It's amazing. It's like being a rock star, there. It's fantastic.
Well, I'm crossing our fingers we can get you to Mocha this year. Okay.
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, my wife was already excited about coming along with me. So.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to send you. I'm going to send you an email, and we'll figure it out, because I got some good news for you on that front. Okay. Take care, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks.
The Exile by Erik Kriek is a gorgeously illustrated Viking saga of revenge. Erik Kriek calls it his Viking Western. It's about a guy who's been away on the warpath and is returning home to some family troubles that have to be resolved. And this is told in just this amazing, kind of 3-color art style that looks like old woodblock cuts or something. It's absolutely gorgeous book that you've got to pick up.
Make sure to smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.